We can see then that the picture painted by proponents of this form of anti-Zionism is clear. In a world where there are oppressed good on the one side and evil oppressors on the other, Israel and Zionism stand right at the heart of evil. This worldview has many elements in common with past conspiratorial anti-Semitic perceptions of Jews. Yet because it emerges from a sphere that propagates freedom for the oppressed and that views racism, including classical racist forms of anti-Semitism, as society's greatest ailments, it garners a level of respectability. As this vehement rhetoric is most commonly leveled at the Israeli state and targets Zionists, without clearly defining who these Zionists actually are, it is often presented as a legitimate form of criticism. However, we've already seen how this anti-Zionism goes beyond rational and reality-based criticism. Does this mean that any criticism of the Israeli government and policy is illegitimate and anti-Semitic? Of course not. The ability to criticize any government's policy or stance lies at the foundation of a healthy democratic society. How then can we differentiate between legitimate and illegitimate criticism towards Israel?
Working out the differences between criticism of Israel, anti-Zionism, anti-Israel activity, anti-Semitism is one of the most complicated issues in this whole field of the study of anti-Semitism. And these different phenomena are often confused and conflated by people on all different sides of the debate. So sometimes people will say anti-Semitic things or express anti-Semitic attitudes, and when they are called out on it, they will say, no, I was just criticising Israel. And they genuinely won't recognise that the language they used resonated with anti-Semitic tropes or anti-Semitic imagery. And similarly, on the other side, criticism of Israel, especially if it's harsh, if it's unfair, if it's expressed in emotional terms, can be misidentified as anti-Semitism. And then you get accusations of bad faith in both directions, of people accusing each other of behaving dishonestly in the claims and in the denials. And it can get very confusing. Now, I think one starting point from this is, let's assume everybody behaves in good faith and everybody is honest in what they think they're saying. I think we can separate out some of these issues and identify the different categories. Let's start by saying that normal political criticism of Israeli government policies and actions is very rarely anti-Semitic. It's the kind of criticism that other governments would face if they were doing the same things. Now that can, of course, include criticism that is unfair, that is inaccurate, that is too harsh, because all governments face that. But if it's voiced in normal political language, talking about human rights, about occupation, about war crimes even, it might be wrong. That doesn't make it anti-Semitic. What changes is when criticism of Israel is voiced in a language that echoes older anti-Semitic allegations against Jews. So if it talks about conspiracies or about hidden Zionist power and influence in Washington or in London or in Paris or elsewhere, if it evokes the old blood libel, the old allegation that Jews kill children for religious purposes or delight in the killing of children, if the criticism evokes Israel's Jewish character as an explanation for why Israel does supposedly bad things, I think in those situations we can say there's something anti-Semitic going on in this criticism.
How do we criticize a country? How do we criticize Israel without drifting into a kind of anti-Semitic rhetoric or even anti-Semitic argument? I remember the criticism of France. Let's take France during the Algerian War. I'm just old enough to remember the left we were fierce critics of French policy in Algeria. The repression, the torture, even those of us who were not friends of the FLN, the National Liberation Front, which had its own terrorist activities, even those of us who were not friends, were very, very critical of the French government's role. We never called for the abolition of France. It wasn't part of the left vision. What we wanted was France out of Algeria, and we were prepared to admire the French state out of Algeria, as we had admired the French state maybe before Algeria, during the Revolution or after the Revolution. France was not a country whose absence we ever advocated, however critical we were of the policies of its government. So that's an example of the way I think Israel should now be criticized. I think of myself, I hope I am thought of as a very strong critic of the current government of Israel and a lover of Zion. And there are a lot of people like me in the American Jewish community and in Israel also, obviously. And the criticism that drifts toward anti-Semitism is the criticism that calls into question the existence of a Jewish state. People on the left who defended national liberation everywhere in the world somehow manage, some of them, to make an exception when it comes to the national liberation of the Jewish people. And that does look like, or come very close to, an anti-Semitic position. It is the desire, it is the claim that the Jews should not be recognized as a people like other peoples, that they do not have the right to call themselves a nation and to claim the rights of a nation in the society of nations. That claim I would call anti-Semitic.